The court system, bail reform. What's it doing to us? What's happening to the people that are out on bail, that aren't paying any bail? And are we getting our money's worth, or in many cases, the lack of our money's worth, with this bail reform initiative? This is another edition of Can I Make You Think? I'm CJ Barnes. Today we have a special. We're going to talk to a bail attorney specifically about bail reform. Hang on, folks. This is going to be good. And hopefully it'll make you think. So today, folks, we are going to talk to a gentleman by the name of Ken W. Good. He has been gracious enough to lend us his time in regards to the bail reform issue, not only here in Texas, but around the country a little bit too, and what it's costing us, what it's causing here and in other neighborhoods where we're basically letting people out on their signature and their word that they're going to show up. Ken, just so you know a little bit about him, is a graduate of the Hardin-Simons University back in 1982 with a Bachelor of Arts degree. He received his master's in 1986 from Tarleton State University and is a part of the Texas A&M system. In 1989, he received his law degree from Texas Tech School of Law, where he was a member of the Texas Law Review. Mr. Good has argued cases before the Texas Supreme Court, the Texas Court of Appeals, the Criminal Court of Appeals, forgive me, along with numerous other courts of appeals, including the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. Ken was nice enough to volunteer to do this, and I hope that after you listen to him, he'll give you something to think about, that maybe we need to reevaluate what we're doing and how we're doing it. So before I begin the interview with Ken, though, I do want to let you know that for some reason, while we were recording the interview, my mic will seem to be very low. So you may have a little trouble hearing me, but you can hear Ken pretty good. Forgive me for the issue. Apparently, we're going to need to get a new mic. But anyway, here it goes. And again, everyone, please enjoy the interview with Ken, and please think about what he's saying, because it may be important to us all very soon. Thank you for listening. I brought on Ken W. Good. Here he is. Thank you, Ken, for being here. And why don't you go ahead and tell me your thoughts and feelings in regards to the gun control and the bail situation?
Well, I think gun control and bail reform are intricately related, because I think that we have a criminal justice system that's kind of in transition. And why I say it's in transition is we have in our urban areas, we have a huge backlog of cases because we shut down our courts for a year. And at the same time, we're trying to do bail reform, which has turned out to be bad bail reform in our urban areas.
Now,
and as a result,
excuse me one second. When you say bail for reform, are you talking about like getting rid of cash bail and doing ankle monitors or something else?
I think when I'm talking about bail reform, I'm talking mostly about just alternative releases to surety bonds, which would be to the private industry. You know, the big problem that we have in our urban areas is how do we process large numbers of people through the jail quickly and efficiently? And historically, we've used what we would call a bail schedule to do that. And what we've seen over the last several years are attempts to try other things. Like in New York, we tried simple release. Harris County in Texas, they're trying the same thing. And those have been fiascos wherever they've been tried. When you create a list of crimes that they have to be released without bond, you actually are doing the opposite of what you want. While you think you're helping the poor, you're tying the hands of judges so they can't do anything about gang members, so they can't do anything about organized crime, as long as they're committing a list on those crimes, a list of specific crimes. And as a result, so someone that comes before a judge with a long criminal history, they need to be treated differently than a first-time offender. But these reforms are tying the hands of the judges so they can't do that. And that's contributing to crime is increased.
So what you're saying, though, is that somebody who, let's say, had a history of violent crimes, 2 or 3 in the past, he comes in front of the judge now and it happens to be a non-violent crime, that what he's done in the past doesn't matter? It's just going to go by this new bail reform that says, you're out?
In our urban areas, they're not looking at your criminal history. They're looking at what are you charged with, irrespective of what your criminal history is. So, and it's not one or two times, it's not three times. In Harris County, you'll have somebody that's been accused of 17 crimes currently and is out on a PR bond. Or like in Harris County, you will
What's
have
a
someone
PR
who,
bond?
a personal bond, which is a free bond, where you're just being released on your own promise that you'll come to court. And there's a Crime Stoppers in Houston is tracking, and they have a list of 170 people who were released on a PR bond for a violent offense, and then they committed murder. And some of them were accused of murder and released on a low bond or a personal bond and commit or accused of a new murder. And that's why some people are starting to say, well, in Harris County, you get one free murder before you're going to be held in jail. That's what these reforms that we're looking at, that's what they're causing. And, even the Democrat DA in Harris County has issued a report saying bail reform is causing crime to increase. When you tell criminals, I'll give you a green light, they will take it. That's why we had somebody in New York celebrating that they'd been released or charged 80 something times for misdemeanor offenses, and they were released every time. When you tell organized crime and career criminals that you're going to give them a pass, a green light, they're going to take it as a green light, and they're going to commit more crime. And that's why I'm saying, if we don't handle and take care of misdemeanors, that's the breeding ground for tomorrow's felons. And that's what, and the felonies are getting even worse too.
But is there, looking at it from just kind of the outside, is there a point where you say, there are certain things that we don't need to be putting people in jail for because they can't come up with $100 for bail?
Well, I don't think, okay, if it's your first time offense, I'll agree with that.
Okay.
But if it's not your first time offense, if it's your sixth or seventh or eighth or ninth, then you're not in jail because you can't afford $100. You're in jail because of your criminal history. Okay. And we can't set rules that we say are to protect the poor, but then enact provisions that prevent judges from even addressing gang members. That's what I think we're getting pushed towards in our urban areas. I don't think that the general voter realizes that's the impact of what is taking place.
Well,
there's nobody in jail nowadays because they're a first-time offender and they're poor. Our jails are currently full of very dangerous people, and the problem is we need more people. We still have very dangerous people who are not in jail, and that's part of the problem. We don't have enough capacity for all the dangerous people who have decided to commit serious crimes right now.
Well, I thought when they talked about doing this bail reform that violent offenders weren't going to be part of it, but it sounds like you're saying that certain levels of violent offenders are walking anyway.
Yes, and I think that's probably, I think that's accurate. And if you look nationally, they would say that I would say that they think the compromise is, well, we won't prosecute so much on misdemeanors anymore. We'll concentrate on felonies. And that's why I say, today's misdemeanors is the breeding ground for tomorrow's felons. And it's really, we're doing a disservice to these people because, if I'm a first-time offender, you can get my attention. If I'm a second-time offender, you can get my attention. But if you're going to give me the green light, you're not going to do anything to me, and we get to the 6th, 7th, and 8th, well, then I know that you're not going to do anything to me until I may not even realize until I do cross a line. But by then, when you cross that line, you've committed a very serious offense, and you're looking at serious jail time. And so this seemingly compromise that we're doing with dangerous people versus misdemeanors, I think is really creating more problems than it's solving, because it's telling people you have a green light and they're taking it because that's what criminals do.
Now, what about these people that are getting these personal bonds? Are they actually showing up for court when they're supposed to?
No, they're not. Harris County, the DA did a report saying that the failure to appear rate's at least 50%. The police officers union in Harris County just reviewed a week's worth of dockets for every misdemeanor court, and they found that the failure to appear rate was 75%. Now, those are jaw-dropping numbers, and you go, that can't be true. But they are when you look. Last year, the DA dismissed 72% of all misdemeanors, and the year before, 72% as well. So you can hold the DA hostage now. Just you get arrested, you never see a judge, you get released on a personal bond, you never go to court, and they ultimately dismiss your. You've got a 72% chance they'll dismiss your case. That's
Hmm.
what's going on in Harris County, and I think you'll find that's going on in our urban areas across the country. That's why we're seeing crime take off.
Okay, and Harris County obviously being one of the, Houston being, the fourth largest city in the country, but are we seeing this, like you said, in New York, but are we seeing it in other large areas, the Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, San Antonio? I
I,
hear a lot about
I
what's happening in California. And how do the lawyers feel about this? I mean, I know you're a member of the Texas Law Review. As a defense attorneys, isn't this what you want?
Well, I'm not a criminal defense attorney. I'm an attorney that specializes in bail law. So
Right.
I specialize in this area of the law of what's good policy for the criminal justice system.
Uh,
And what works out. I mean, the reality is what's good for the criminal justice system is usually good for the bail industry because they are such closely tied partners. And I tell judges, look, if you don't care that your defendants show up for court, then you don't need the bail industry. But if you care, then you need to encourage more defendants to use us. And the reason why is we have the lowest failure to appear rate of any release mechanism currently used or ever been used. And that has a huge impact.
so you're
If the
talking about
lower,
independent bail people, not when you say the lowest percent.
oh, yeah, yeah, even the federal government statistics say that the private industry has the lowest failure to appear rate. And, what the lowest failure to appear rate means is more people come to court, cases get resolved more quickly. And that's even more important now with the pandemic ending because we have huge backlogs of cases. And just by using more surety bonds, you can decrease your backlog over time quicker than if you used more personal bonds. I mean, if you have a 40%, 70, 50%, or 75% failure to appear rate, your courts aren't resolving cases. The only way they're resolving them is by dismissing them. Your criminal justice system is close to collapse. And that's what's going on in Harris County. And then they decided, well, these PR bonds or personal bonds have worked out so disastrously, we should use more of them in the federal courts. I mean, not federal, in the district courts. And so if you look on the report each day of the judgment and eyesight, which is the failures to appear for the day before, there's 40-50% of those every day are personal bonds. And that used to never happen. And so, and the problem I see with the failure to appear is when it's a personal bond. When it's the private industry, we have an incentive to go out and find them and bring them back and get their case back on track as soon as possible. We get rewarded for that. But when it's a personal bond, they issue a warrant. The warrant goes into the warrant system, joins the tens of thousands of other warrants waiting to be served in our metropolitan areas. And there was a study that said in those areas, 80% of those people come back by committing a new crime. Sometimes it's a traffic stop. Sometimes it's something much more serious.
Now, not knowing a lot about the independent bailsmen stuff, tell me a little bit about what you guys do. Somebody just call you from jail and say, "Hey, I need to get out," and you give up the money? Is there a process? What are
There
you
is a
allowed to do
process.
if they don't show up?
I think one of the fallacies on this, we did a podcast about what is it that bondsmen do, and I don't think that people realize we're usually dealing not with the defendant initially, but with the family. And so we're dealing with families who have not given up on their defendants. And that is an important pressure point to get defendants to change their course of action. And so when we're dealing with them, we're also dealing with their families who stuck their necks out for them. And so if the family comes to us and says, hey, they're back on drugs, we're letting you know that they're planning on running, then we can notify the court and we can get them back before the judge, and the judge can say, okay, you need to go back to jail for a while, or what's going on, and get them back on track. But you lose all that involvement. And also the industry, we do one thing well, we get people to go to court. And how we do that is they have to check in with us. They check in with us more than they ever check in with anybody else because nobody else could afford to do that. what we do, we remind them of their court dates. In situations where it's a big bond, they can't go to court, we go get them and take them to court because we are on the hook to pay the full amount of the bond if they don't go to court. And then after they miss court, the bail industry, depending on where you are, they have incentives. You have a period of time that if you can get them back quickly, get their case back on track, then you won't have to pay the full amount of the bond. You're still going to have to pay something. And so we, in Texas, the bondsman can't go arrest them, but they can go locate them and then notify law enforcement. And so we work very closely with law enforcement in finding, but we also have these personal relationships with the defendant. So we develop it with their families. And so they get, they miss court, they get scared and they don't know what to do. So they just hide. But we have a relationship with them where they can say, okay, you messed up. But you know what? It's not the end of the world. Your case can get back on track. Let us take you back to court. Let us take you before the judge and we can get this straightened out for you. And so we do that every day. But when you're on a personal bond, you don't have that. I mean, they're just making a promise they'll show up for court. And when they get scared, they get scared. And when they figure when they're afraid that they're going to go to jail for a long time, they may run and they may decide this is their last hurrah and they may commit other crimes that could be substantially serious. And so I think, the bonding industry doesn't really get credit for all the great things it does. I always describe that, the bail industry is the grease that keeps the conveyor belt of the criminal justice system running, because every month the criminal justice system adds the same number, same average number of cases to the conveyor belt every month. And if we don't get those resolved, then the conveyor belt slows down and we start having a backlog. Without the private surety bail industry, that conveyor belt won't even turn sometimes. And that's what you're seeing with misdemeanor cases in Harris County. And that's why you're seeing crime go up, because cases are not getting resolved and they see that as a green light. And then if they're not getting resolved, they're getting dismissed. And so hey, I got away with it one time, maybe I'll get away with the next 3 times. And then you're losing job opportunities in the inner city because, we had these protests, or you could call them riots, a couple of years ago, and they did a lot of property damage. And people then were saying, hey, it's just property damage, it's all insured. Insurance companies don't pay for that type of property damage. And in a lot of cases, the business owners didn't build back because they didn't feel like that their businesses were protected by the local officials. And so then you've got even worse situation because you've got an economic situation where the tax base is now substantially smaller. And so they have even fewer tax dollars, and they have less of ability to attract new business to their area. And that just builds on other problems in the inner cities. We've had no education has failed, families have failed, and they have an outside influence on them like drugs or gangs. And that's just a recipe for disaster. And we can't give up in the criminal justice system, which is some of these people's last chance, last opportunity to turn around.
Well, okay, we know COVID kind of sent everything crazy.
Sure.
Prior to COVID, how many of the people that were getting out on bail were using, in a percentage, were using a bail bonds type place?
Well, it depends on the part of the country. We hear
here
you have to know where your terms are. Where are you located?
I'm northwest side of Houston.
Okay, yeah. Before COVID, the big change in Harris County was the O'Donnell case. Where they filed a lawsuit and then they spent $8 million to defend it. The judges were all winning, and then there was an election, and we had Rodney Ellis and other members of the Commissioner's Court and the Houston Chronicle saying, well, we have to settle this case. We spent $8 million. And so we had all new judges elected with the promise that they're going to settle this case, give the plaintiffs whatever they want. And that's what they did. Now they've spent $100 million to implement this settlement with catastrophic results. Now they've thrown another $42 million out because, we're in election year, and still crime is going up. And so before O'Donnell, most people were getting surety bonds because we used a bail schedule. So if the people could afford it, they would post a surety bond. They would go to court. The bonds would encourage them to go to court. We have the lowest failure to appear rate. Now, post O'Donnell, even though O'Donnell's been reversed now, but the county refuses to do anything about it because it's now become so political. The politicians just want the social issue, not what's best for the criminal justice system. So they're implementing a system, or they're using a system in Harris County now that's been overturned by the courts, and they're continuing to use it. And the problem is Texas has changed the law now, and so that they cannot use their settlement anymore, but they're still hiding behind that and refusing to change because Texas laws changed. So it's just become so inundated with politics that you can't really make a decision of what's in the best interest of the criminal justice system. And so you've got all this posturing going on, like Lena Hidalgo, months before the election, is blaming bondsmen for the increase of crime, which is the weirdest and the silliest argument you could ever imagine, because fewer and fewer bonds are being posted by surety bonds but by the private industry. But now you're saying, oh, all the increases of crime is because the bondsmen are writing fewer and fewer bonds. No, you're saying because we're not charging enough money. That it's just all politics right now.
And it seems to me a little bit that these changes, yeah, it's political, but and I know that you talk about what's best for the system, but what's best for the actual person who's been arrested? Not they're not an inmate yet, they're not a convict yet. The accused, that's the word I'm looking for. Is it really that good for the accused to get out and walk away with just having
I
to
agree
sign
with
a
that.
name?
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Are we helping anybody?
No, in fact, I would say you're making it worse, because you're giving them the go ahead. And when they take that, okay, I think I'm going to commit a few more crimes. Look at the Cadillac converter crisis we have right now.
Mm-hmm.
Who's taking advantage of that? Organized crime's taking advantage of that, because the people that are doing the cut and grab, they're making pennies on the dollar. The people who are really making a killing, $1,000 per Cadillac converter, are the people that are buying it from them. What is Harris County doing? We're decriminalizing that, and we're trying to put a penalty on people to keep them from buying it. That ain't going to happen. It's organized crime that's behind it, gangs that are doing it,
they'll get it out of Harris County and sell it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's just become so inundated with politics. You've got to, there's theories of how you do criminal justice, and one of them is this broken windows theory. It probably has a bad name now because it was very successful in New York, but it was Mayor Giuliani, and so because he was a Republican, you just got to, people on the other side just give a bad name to it. But it is a proven theory. It works very well, and under that theory, you start with a broken window, and you have strict rules, and you prosecute, and you get people to turn around and change what they're doing just from a broken window, and then you build from there. We're not doing that anymore. In fact, we have people arguing that we shouldn't punish people for any misdemeanor. We should just focus on violent offenses. And that's why I argue that, if that's what we're going to do, today's misdemeanor cases is the breeding ground for tomorrow's felonies. And so we can't allow that.
Okay, but Texas would be what most people would consider a reasonably conservative state.
It's a right of center state.
Right. And yet in the big cities, like, San Antonio, Austin, Houston seems to be coming that way. I thought there were state laws, and like the case you talked about, where the state has overturned that and said you can't do that, and yet they're still doing it.
Yeah, in Harris County for the misdemeanors, they are. They're just ignoring Texas law. And you're going to see a big standoff, I think, in the upcoming or a big brouhaha about that in the upcoming legislative session, because I think Harris County wants 3 new county courts, but for criminal cases, it's like, well, why do you need those? You're not following the law now. And you're gonna see somebody, I think, file a bill to revoke the statute that authorizes Harris County to hire magistrates that do the original setting of bail, the original arraignment, because they're the DA says they're the problem. They're not following Texas law. They're doing what the commissioners or a clique on the commissioners court wants them to do. And so you're going to see a tremendous push, I think, at the legislature for people saying, If you can't work together, then you don't have magistrates. You'll just use visiting judges for a while. We want more accountability. And I think we're going to have that because we have to be a state of laws in Texas. We can't have one set of rules in Harris County, another set of rules in Montgomery County, another set of rules in Fort Bend County. The other thing we haven't talked about that's influencing this in our urban areas is the impact of Soros and his PAC on DA races, because he has been, targeting district attorney races, and you can see the impact of those. Where in LA, the DA's office says, well, we just have a disagreement of who the real victim is. They believe the person charged with the crime is the real victim, not the person who's had a crime committed against them. And then you see Bowden or Broden or whatever the DA's name was in San Francisco get recalled. And there's a chance that the DA in LA may be recalled as well. He has a petition that's been submitted, but I have my doubts because they've just announced they're not going to let any campaign poll watchers view them as they're verifying the signatures. So I think they're going to say that not enough signatures were gathered to try to keep him in office, but that's all politics.
The DA in Dallas County get involved in Texas that you know of?
Yes, he supported the DA in Dallas. He supported, I believe, the DA in Fort Bend County, and he supported initially the DA in Harris County. Kim Ogg originally supported the lawsuit for bail reform for misdemeanors, but now she's come around and said it's gone too far. It's causing crime to increase. And she's blaming the judges. And then you see the judges turn around and say, oh, no, it's not our fault crime's increasing. It's the DA's fault. And I find that interesting because, who sets bail in Texas? Right now it's the judges, the magistrate or the judge. But it's the judges that set bail, and that's who we want setting bail. Right. They can get a recommendation from the DA, but it's the judges who set bail. So these problems that we're seeing in Harris County are coming from the judges, and the judges that are up for election need to face the consequences of their actions.
Okay. Well, I want to say thank you for taking the time to talk to me. But if you had one last thing you'd like to say for the people to listen to, what would you like them to take away from this?
What I would ask people to seriously consider here is, I'm going to make a bold statement. I don't think there's a compromise here. We have to vote out the people who are making these decisions that are based on politics and not what's best for the criminal justice system. And let me just make one point there. We have the county court at law number 8 in Harris County. He is an avowed socialist. He says, I'm a socialist. I want to wreak havoc on the criminal justice system. And he has been recommended to be removed from office. And he lost his primary, even in the Democratic primary. But he wrote the majority of the settlement of the O'Donnell case, which is now tying the hands of the judges. And so people keep asking me, well, what's the compromise? There's not a compromise. The compromise is not give up on misdemeanors and just go after violent offenses. We can't just allow every time someone goes to a Houston Astros game, they have to be worried the whole time they're sitting in the stands, somebody's stealing their Cadillac converter. We can't have that.
Or getting beat up when you walk out of the game.
So we have to have peace. We have to have public safety. And so I don't believe there's a compromise. And so I think my point that I would make is, I think it's this one time where we should be we should be voting based upon the candidate's position on public safety and not identity politics. And so I would encourage people to find out the candidates stand on public safety. And if they tell you that they're in favor of public safety, but they have a failure to appear rate of 75%, which is almost on average every current judge in misdemeanor court, they need to go.
And then, there are times when, even I'll say this, there are black and white issues. Sometimes there isn't a lot of room for gray.
Yes.
And, like you said, first time, anybody can talk about a first time. But you're right. When you start talking about second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and more, maybe there's something else.
Well, we're a country of second chances, but we should not be a country of 10 chances. Then we have no accountability.
Understood. Again, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with us. I really appreciate it. You've definitely given the people that listen something to think about, and I hope they will. And
Me
good luck
too.
to you. And if there's ever a time you got something else you want to talk about, let me know.
I sure will. And if people want more information, they can visit our website, pbtx.com, or they can go to, we have our own podcast called The Bell Post, and it's thebellpost.com. Thank you very
The
much, sir.
Bail Post,
Yes, sir.
BAIL Post.com.
Yes, sir.
And then your website, which I read earlier, is P as in Peter, B as in Bail, TX.com.
Yes, sir.
All right, just wanted to be sure. Thank you again, Ken. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Okay, bye.
So, folks, I hope you've enjoyed the interview with Ken Good, bail attorney. The issue here, I think, is the progressive thought process versus a more conservative thought process. Not sure whether or not there really is a gray area, if there's a compromise to be found. But it's what I want you to think about, and it's what I hope that we can think about. And again, things we need to talk about without hating each other. So, you may not agree with everything that was said. You may not like it. But folks, we got to do something. We can't have criminals repeating time after time after time, not showing up for court, things getting thrown out. On the other hand, we can't just take people that their first time being accused of something and lock them up and throw away the key, so to speak, because there's an accusation of whatever. So there should be some way to keep an eye on them. There should be some way to make sure that we're keeping an eye on those people we let out of jail. And there should be some way to make sure that we're letting out people that aren't a danger to our community and aren't necessarily motivated to recommit another crime or repeat the same crime. And on the other hand, keep the ones in jail where that is going to be a problem. Folks, this is CJ Barnes. This has been a special episode of Can I Make You Think? I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you again next time.